Hey, this is Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Today I'm going to show you how to adjust the valves on a CRF450R. Adjusting your valves is something that should be done as preventative maintenance. Unfortunately, most people don't do this until their bike either doesn't start or just doesn't run right. So today I'm going to show you how easy it is to check your valve clearance and adjust it if necessary. And this will help prevent any problems while you're out riding. So today we're actually going to be working on a 2005 CRF450R, but the procedure is similar from 02 to 08. So be sure to reference your model specific service manual. Also, this engine came out of a bike we're working on for a series we call Roached Racing. So if you're interested, be sure to check that out. We go through the whole bike from the frame up, and then we're going to take it racing. That being said, let's do it up. To do this job, you'll need some basic hand tools, rags, and safety glasses. We're also using a cam chain tensioner stopper plate, a cam gear holder tool, feeler gauges, calipers or micrometer, paper and pen, magnet, and flashlight. For parts, we'll be using a Tusk valve cover gasket, and you'll also need some shims. We're using a hot cam shim kit for this bike, but if you don't have the whole kit, the shims are available individually on the website. Always refer to your model-specific service manual for more information, proper procedures, and specs. Something I want to point out is even though our engine is out of the bike, you can do this with your engine still in the bike. So to begin, we started with a clean bike, but we're also going to wipe around our cylinder head. And then if you have compressed air, you can blow it into this hole and it will blow any debris around your spark plug, and then you can remove the spark plug. With the spark plug removed, we'll remove our valve cover by removing 3 bolts holding it down. As we take this apart, we'll want to lay everything out on a clean rag in order. With the bolts out, we'll take off the cover. Okay, so our bike, this is part of our Roached Racing Series bike, and something's terribly wrong. This chain should never be this loose, it should be on there tight, and our cam sprocket bolts are both look a little stripped. So our loose cam chain is obviously a problem we'll have to fix in our Roached Racing Series. Hopefully yours isn't like this. Your cam chain should be on the sprocket tight, and the bolt heads should be in good condition. And if they're not, then you're going to have to replace some parts. After this, we'll remove our timing plugs and rotate the engine to top dead center on the compression stroke. The primary drive gear has a dot on it that will align with the arrow on the engine case. That dot will get us fairly close, but we'll also want to make sure our cam lobes are facing up and towards the rear of the engine. Now we'll go to the other side of the engine and make sure our flywheel mark aligns with the mark in the case. We also need to make sure that the 2 marks on our cam sprocket are lined up with the arrows on the cam tower. With our engine rotated to top dead center on the compression stroke, we're ready to check our valve clearance, which is 5 to 7 thousandths of an inch on the intake and 10 to 12 thousandths of an inch on the exhaust. And then our decompressor clearance is an additional 14 thousandths of an inch added to whatever our clearance is on our exhaust. Now our Tusk tool measures in thousandths of an inch as well as millimeters, so it really depends which system you're most comfortable using. But for me, I like to use inches, so we're going to measure in that. And I like to start with our minimum clearance as we check the clearances, and then we can go from there. As you measure the clearance, make sure you feel a slight drag, but you don't want to have it so tight that you feel like you're forcing the feeler gauge in. We had 3 valves out of adjustment, so we'll need to get those back within spec. We can remove the tension from our cam chain, and normally we'll do that by removing the bolt in the rear of the cam chain tensioner and use our cam chain tensioning tool to take the tension off. But unfortunately, something happened to our tensioner and our cam chain is already loose. So we'll actually just be removing both bolts that hold the tensioner on. If you don't have the chain tensioner tool, just remove it the same way. Okay, we just removed our tensioner and this is what it looked like. It should have been extended and wasn't, and the internal spring is broken. So we have our new tensioner. Without anything holding it, it should extend all the way just like that. With the cam chain tension released, we'll next remove our cam sprocket bolts using our cam gear holder. And something I want to point out, since we have our engine on the stand, we can get to both bolts easily. If the engine is in the frame, you'll have to loosen the bottom bolt, rotate the engine over one turn, loosen the other and remove it, and then go one more turn and remove the second bolt from the cam gear. So with our cam sprocket removed, you can let the cam chain fall in the bottom. It's no big deal. Some people like to keep the cam chain up so they can get to it easy, but we just use a magnet to pull it back up. So I'm not worried about it. And one thing I like to do is put a rag where the cam chain normally goes. And that keeps us from dropping any shims or bolts down in there. Now that we've done that, we'll take our cam holder off and we'll remove the bolts in a crisscross pattern. When you take this off, there's going to be shim buckets under here inside the holder, and it's easy for them to drop. So as you pull it off, be aware of that and try to keep everything intact and try not to drop any shims. So our cam holder came out nicely, and we still have our exhaust shims that we'll remove, but it's important to remember which shim goes to which valve. So always place everything out in order, and that will help us with get the right shims back in and make sure we have the right measurements. Since our intake shims stayed in the buckets, we'll remove the buckets from the cam holder and take out each shim. And then we'll measure each one and write it down, and that will help us determine the correct shim we need to put in. To determine our new shim sizes, we'll use a set of digital calipers to measure each shim's thickness, and then we'll record that on our paper. To make things easier, we wrote everything down. So we started with our specs, and then I like to start with the exhaust on top and then the intake, and just write down our clearances and also the shim sizes that we took out. So what we want to do is plug our measurement into our formula. So we have A equals B minus C plus D. A is our new shim thickness, B is our measured clearance, C is our specified clearance, and D is our old shim thickness. As I mentioned before, we're doing all of this in inches. So we measured 8 thousandths of an inch, and we'll subtract it from our desired clearance, which is 6 thousandths. And spec, they're telling us we can be between 5 thousandths and 7 thousandths. So we want to go in between those two. So 8 thousandths minus 6 thousandths is 2 thousandths. And then we add the 2 thousandths to our shim converted to inches is 63 thousandths of an inch. So we'll add that, and we actually want a new shim that's 65 thousandths of an inch. Convert it back to metric, and it comes out to 1.65 millimeter shim. These shims usually come in 5/100ths of a millimeter increments. So if it doesn't come out to be the exact one, pick the closest shim to what your measurement came out to, install it in the bike, and recheck everything. Now that we have the correct shim selected, we'll go ahead and put a drop of oil on them, put each one on the correct valve. With our shims installed, we'll now put our shim buckets back into the cam tower and install it. As we do this, we'll make sure all parts are properly lubricated. As we install the cam tower, I like to put my fingers underneath the shim buckets so they don't fall out, and just be careful that everything stays in place while you're installing it. When we installed the cam tower, I want to point out that we made sure the cam lobes are in the same position that they would be in the top dead center compression position. Now that that's on there and taken care of and seated, we can apply some engine oil or some type of lube to the bolts that hold our cam holder in place and torque them to 10 foot-pounds. Be sure to install these in a crisscross pattern. With the cam holder bolts torqued, we're going to want to remeasure our valve clearances, and that way we don't have to double do any work by undoing our cam sprocket or cam chain again if we made a wrong measurement or put the wrong shim in or need to change one out. With our valve clearances in spec, we can now check our decompression clearance, which is 14 thousandths of an inch plus whatever our right exhaust valve clearance is. So in our case, we had 12 thousandths of an inch on this. So we'll add those two together to get 26 thousandths of an inch. We'll be sliding our feeler gauge above the rocker arm and below the tappet. So our feeler gauge doesn't fit, and we will need to adjust this using an 8mm box end wrench and a flat blade screwdriver. Torque the adjuster nut to 7 foot-pounds and recheck the clearance. Next, we'll clean our cam sprocket as well as the threads on our camshaft, and we'll do this because we're using thread lock on our cam sprocket bolts. Now we can remove our rag, use our magnet to fish the cam chain up. Install the cam sprocket with the timing marks lining up with the arrows on the cam tower. We're using a little bit of blue thread lock on here, and as you can see, we also picked up some new sprocket bolts from our OEM diagrams on our website. Using our Motion Pro cam gear holder, we'll torque the cam sprocket bolts to 15 foot-pounds. For us, this was really easy since our engine is out of the frame. If your engine's in the frame, install the lower cam sprocket bolt, rotate the crankshaft 1 revolution, install the next one and torque it to 15 foot-pounds, go 1 more revolution and torque the second bolt. The next step for us is to install our cam chain tensioner. For most of you, you'll just need to remove your cam chain tensioner holding tool. Install the bolt and sealing washer back into the tensioner and rotate the engine 2 revolutions and recheck your timing marks. All right, looks like our marks are lining up. So now we'll clean our gasket sealing surface and install a new gasket onto our valve cover. With our valve cover gasket installed, make sure our 3 bolt gaskets are in good condition, as well as our spark plug gasket, and install it onto the cylinder head. Install our 3 mounting bolts and torque to 7 foot-pounds. After that, we'll install our timing covers. The last thing you need to do is install your spark plug back into the bike. So as you can see, ours is in rough shape, so we're gonna go ahead and get a new one and then install it. And that's all there is to checking and adjusting your valve clearance. It's really not that bad of a job, so don't put it off. Keep your bike running right. And for any parts and accessories, check out our website. We give free shipping on orders over $75. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.